Hello, welcome to the interview here on France 24. Now, if I mention the name Bahrain to you, might not mean that much unless I tell you it's a small Persian Gulf kingdom. It has a very large neighbor in Saudi Arabia, and it has a ruling monarchy, a Sunni monarchy. You might also remember that very briefly last year, there were some pro-democracy protests. They flared in the early part of last year, and then most of the world watched as they were put down by the government and also by Saudi troops who came in to sort of help out. A year later, we don't really talk about an Arab Spring happening in Bahrain anymore, but we are all watching very closely the situation in another country, Syria, where things have gotten very violent very quickly. And now everyone is asking, what's next? Including my guest today, who's the foreign minister of Bahrain, Khalid bin Ahmed Al Khalifa. Welcome to our studios. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, sir.
I'm starting with Syria because everyone has their eyes on Syria right now. Yes. Your country was among the Arab nations that has called upon Bashar Assad to leave power. You said that the situation's gone on too long. You want to see change in Syria. But this is a Sunni monarchy. Have you been supporting you haven't really supported the uprising either, which is interesting. You're calling on Assad to lead, but at the same time, Bahrain has not been seen as really supporting the rebellion in Syria.
Well, I don't know what degrees you see different countries supporting or doing their role, but we are part of the Arab League. The Arab League had an initiative to bring both parties to the negotiation table, the opposition and the government. That did not happen. Kofi Annan went back and forth and nothing materialized. Talked to all superpowers. We haven't seen that happening. At the same time, every day people get killed. People get blown up. Every day you hear 100, 120. And this is something that we cannot live with. The more people die, the more that we will have a moral responsibility on us to do something. So we do now say that there has to be something done other than whatever was promised before 2 days ago when we met.
Are you worried, though, about sort of the potential for chaos? Because I guess what it has been until now is there's been very much an emphasis put on wanting stability in the region. The ruling monarchy of Bahrain would like to see stability in the region.
Well, Bahrain, being a member of the GCC, would like to see a stability in the region. We are a group there for good and for the stability of the region. Member of one of 6 countries, and you know them all. So we play a role to have the region, rid itself of all the problems that we are going through now. We have the Iranian nuclear file, the 5+1 talking to Iran and going nowhere in those talks. And we have Syria disintegrating into a possible civil war in no time. We have change that is happening in a positive way in other neighboring countries like in Egypt and Tunisia and succeeding. So we do want to see countries stabilize. We don't want to see them go into the wrong direction.
You mentioned Iran before, and it's no secret that Bahrain has often been very critical of Iran and the role that it sees or believes Iran has been playing in politics, both in Bahrain and also in Syria right now. What is behind this real suspicion, if I might call it that, of Iran?
Well, I think it's way beyond suspicion. You have enough...
Hatred.
Well, no, we have enough... It's not suspicion from our side towards what Iran is doing. Iran, there are very clear evidence of what they are doing, not only in Bahrain, but the whole region, the whole Middle East, the whole world.
Let's talk about Bahrain. Bahrain has the people who were taking part in the protests. Many of them were young, they were bloggers. Many of them were Shia. As I said, the ruling monarchy is a Sunni monarchy. Now, your government has basically said that Iran was behind those protests.
If I may say, Bahrain is not a ruling monarchy. Bahrain is a constitutional country that has a constitution.
It doesn't have a constitutional monarchy yet. That's what the opposition...
Well, I don't know what degree you see a constitutional monarchy. There are different kinds of constitutional monarchy. There's the British constitutional monarchy, and there are other constitutional monarchy. But we are a country that is led by His Majesty the King and ruled by a system, according to the Constitution.
But, sir, this was the whole point of the protests, as I understand them. The protesters, they were never calling for a revolution. They didn't want to overthrow the monarchy. They were just calling for reform.
Well, let me get to that point. First of all, those protests are nothing new to Bahrain. Bahrain, if you look at its modern history, it's full of protests throughout its period. And with those protests, we have seen reforms in every period. So nothing started in 2011 in Bahrain. This is nothing new to us. Maybe it was encouraged
But-
by the events in the Arab world. Yes, it's fine to say that. But to say that the whole thing started in 2011 as a revolution, no, I don't see it.
But let's be fair here. The pictures, the images that the world did see were of very large protests in Manama on the central square, and then no protests because the camp was dismantled. It seems that on some level the government took these protests very seriously.
Well, I don't know what kind of protest that you would see it at one scale.
The
very
camp,
large,
the large encampment.
and suddenly the next day you don't see it at all. What kind of protest is that? It tells you whether that is a legitimate representative of what's in the mind of the people or not. If the people, in their majority, have in their mind that they will want to achieve that change, that protest would have not stopped. No one would have been able to stop that protest. But you mentioned in the beginning in the introduction.
But can I just jump in? Because you just said the protests would not have stopped. The protests have not stopped. The protests if you speak to activists on the ground, they say, they're not in central square of Manama. They've dispersed. They're smaller. They can't.
There is no comparison, sir. There is no comparison between the events of March, April, or February, March into April 2011 and today.
I agree because they haven't been allowed.
No, what do you mean haven't been allowed? There have been protests that have been allowed many times since then.
We saw protests broken up by tear gas, by riot police earlier this month.
They start as an orderly protest with a license from the government, and they end with a very small group from those protests who happen to be in the number of thousands going and trying to go through a police line or trying to, interfere with law and order of the country. This is what happened. But it's not that protests are not being allowed. But you mentioned something about, you said Saudi troops. These are Peninsula Shield forces.
Well, they're gone now, I understand that.
No, they are not gone. They are still in Bahrain, and they are doing their role that they came for. Protecting vital installations of Bahrain against foreign intervention.
Could I just wait? Let me put it another way to you. I take aboard what you just said. Could I also posit to you that the Saudi troops came in because they were appalled at the prospect of an Arab Spring right on their doorstep?
No.
And the monarchy in Bahrain totally agreed with that.
Not at all.
They're not going to allow a
Not
revolution
at all.
on
It
their
was a request from the government of Bahrain to the GCC to put into effect the agreement signed between all six of them. Peninsula Shield Force. And the role of that force is to protect
But that was the
vital
pretext.
installations.
That was the pretext.
But
that was the excuse.
What else have they done?
No, but
give me an example of one other thing that has been.
Well, I'm asking you, is it a coincidence that before the Saudi troops came in, there were large protests in Manama, and after they left, there were no more protests?
No. It's not a coincidence.
Is that wrong?
If was dealing with the protests.
But is that wrong? I'm sorry. The question.
Of course, it's wrong.
There were no protests after the Saudi troops left.
Well, it's not the Saudi troops did not deal with any of those protests. If you would show me one example of somebody coming forward to say that he has been dealing with a Saudi trooper in Bahrain, then you will have a legitimate conversation here.
Okay.
Or a point. But other than that, nothing had to do with that. They came in for a role and they left. Nobody can say that they came in contact with the people.
So where's the dialogue right now? Because after this, Bahrain was seen as a country in which the king was going to now have a dialogue with the various groups in society, including the Shias. Is that dialogue on political reform? How would you describe the state of it right now?
Well, the dialogue, Bahrain is in constant dialogue. It has never stopped. But it was put forward since February twice. One by the Crown Prince, when he put the principles on the table to talk to the opposition about moving forward and solving the problem. That was one. And then the proximate next dialogue that happened into 2011, later in the year, which resulted in 11 constitutional amendments. That was a dialogue that was boycotted by Al-Wifaq. For whatever reason, you can ask Al-Wifaq why they have boycotted, but it was a legitimate dialogue that answered and reached demands that were put forward by Al-Wifaq in the past. But they have decided not to be part of it.
The dissidents, I guess that's a word that has been used to describe them. I understand that the government says they have all been released at this point, those who were arrested at the height of the protests.
Those who were arrested for freedom of expression have all been released.
So they're political prisoners.
They are prisoners for crimes that they have committed against the state. And this is according to the law of Bahrain. Their cases are in the ordinary courts now.
How do you define a crime against the state? I'm just curious.
Plotting against the state.
Plotting against the state.
You can have a group of conspirators sitting in one room and plotting against the government.
Just to be clear, I understand, just to be clear, Your government defines what constitutes plotting against the state.
The law defines what constitutes plotting against the state. The government doesn't wake up every morning and think what is a plot against the state. There is a law, and we go according to the law.
Right now, there's a sense that Bahrain is very much stuck in the process of reconciliation. It is a very divided society. Briefly, do you see a prospect for healing these divides in the near future?
Yes, I do. You know why?
Despite the tensions.
Despite the tensions. All during the tensions of this year and last year. You haven't seen one Bahraini Sunni killed by a Shia because he's a Sunni. And you haven't seen a Shia killed by a Sunni just because of his sect. Bahraini society is an example of cohabitation, an example of living together. Yes, we had a problem. Yes, we have a political problem that we have to solve. But I am optimistic that being in the middle of the problem means that we're going to get out of it soon.
There's no Arab Spring in Bahrain. We're not going to see an Arab Spring.
I think, if you're going to see it that way, the Arab Spring started in Bahrain 10 years ago, or even 20 years ago. It's done stuff.
Ms. Foreign Minister, we're going to have to leave it there. Khalid bin Ahmed Al Khalifa, thank you very much for being very patient with my questions today.
Absolutely.
We've been talking about the situation in Syria as well as the domestic situation in Bahrain. Thank you very much for being my guest, and thanks to all of you for watching the interview here on France 24.